Deshaun, Tyler, and Mia never planned to become criminals. But by the time they realized how deep they were in, one of them had vanished, and the others were being hunted by both the police and a criminal network they accidentally crossed. Hawthorne Ridge had always seemed like the kind of place where nothing serious ever happened. It was a clean, peaceful suburb where families felt safe, and children played outside until dusk. Parents waved from driveways, and local shop owners knew customers by name. But on a crisp September morning, that feeling of safety was suddenly shaken. 5 houses had been broken into overnight. Electronics, wallets, and even a car had gone missing. The oddest part, none of the doors were broken, and no windows were smashed. Alarm systems remained silent, and security cameras caught nothing useful. It was as if the thieves had simply walked in and walked out unnoticed. At first, the police treated the incidents as isolated. Maybe someone had forgotten to lock a door. Maybe it was a single opportunist. But just days later, more homes were hit. 7 in total by the end of the second week, all in different parts of the neighborhood, all targeted in similar ways. Local news picked up the story. Panic began to set in. Neighbors who once trusted each other now grew suspicious. Parents who once let their kids ride bikes alone started keeping them indoors. Hardware stores ran out of security systems and deadbolts. The most confusing part for investigators was the style of the crimes. The thefts weren't precise or well planned. Some houses had valuables left untouched, while small items like headphones or old phones were taken. One house was robbed of snacks and soft drinks, while expensive jewelry was left in plain sight. These weren't the patterns of professional criminals. There were signs of inexperience: unplugged cords dragged behind stolen items, muddy footprints leading away from open doors, half-eaten food left on kitchen counters. But whoever was behind it moved quickly and avoided capture. Detectives working the case began to wonder if it wasn't adults they were dealing with. The randomness, the mistakes, and the lack of violence all pointed to something different. Maybe it wasn't a group of career thieves. Maybe it was something far more unexpected, someone young, reckless, and hiding in plain sight. As officers dug deeper, the pattern started to point toward local teenagers. But the thought of kids committing these crimes in such a quiet community was difficult to accept. No one wanted to believe it, not yet. But the truth was getting closer. The first real break in the case came when a pawn shop 2 towns away logged a used laptop that matched the serial number of one stolen during the recent break-ins. The shop owner had followed the law, taking an ID and capturing security footage of the seller. When detectives reviewed the footage, what they saw was both shocking and confusing. The person pawning the laptop wasn't an adult, it was a teenage boy, no older than 16. He wore a hoodie pulled low over his face, but his youth was unmistakable. This changed everything. The police had been operating under the assumption that adults were behind the thefts. Now, they had to consider the possibility that the criminals were kids. Investigators shifted focus. They started reviewing school absences and disciplinary reports, searching for any unusual behavior. Surveillance footage from nearby convenience stores showed a group of teens loitering late at night, sometimes wearing backpacks that seemed full to heavy. One officer, scrolling through social media, noticed something odd. A few accounts run by local teenagers had suddenly gone dark. Others had posted cryptic images: a glove on a driveway, a car key balanced on a branch, a close-up of a house window. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they began to form a disturbing pattern. The real breakthrough came when one of the confiscated phones, taken from a student during an unrelated incident at a nearby high school, was searched under warrant. Hidden inside a messaging app was a group chat labeled Midnight Club. It included 5 members, all students from local schools. They had been sharing photos of stolen items, maps, and even tips on how to avoid cameras. Some messages joked about who would get the high score for the week. One message read, "Hit 3 houses last night, still no alarms. I think I'm winning." The boys involved came from different backgrounds. One was a straight A student. Another had recently moved in with his aunt after his parents split up. None had criminal records. Their ages ranged from 13 to 17. What connected them wasn't crime in the traditional sense, it was boredom, thrill-seeking, and influence from online videos glorifying break-ins, urban exploring, and so-called stealth missions. What began as a game had escalated into something dangerous. The police knew they had to act quickly, not only to stop further crimes but to protect the kids from themselves. They set up a quiet surveillance operation, determined to catch them in the act. The surveillance operation started quietly. Unmarked cars were parked near suspected members' homes, and plainclothes officers were placed around key areas. For 2 nights, nothing happened. Then, just past midnight on the 3rd night, movement was detected. 2 teens were spotted leaving a side street on bikes, dressed in black, with backpacks strapped tight. Officers followed at a distance, watching as the boys approached a quiet cul-de-sac and stopped outside a dark garage. They moved confidently, as if they'd done this many times before. Within minutes, they were inside. Police moved in quickly and caught them as they tried to leave. Inside their bags were stolen credit cards, house keys, a laptop, and a small envelope of cash. But what disturbed officers most was what else they found: plastic card skimmers, fake driver's licenses, handwritten maps, and digital blueprints of neighborhood homes, all pulled from real estate listings. These weren't just curious teens breaking in for fun anymore. This was organized, strategic, and growing more dangerous by the day. When investigators questioned the boys, the truth began to unfold. The Midnight Club wasn't only about stealing. It had become a game with levels, rules, and rankings. They scored points by breaking into houses undetected. Extra points were given for stealing specific items listed in their chat. Some members started learning about digital scams, how to skim cards, how to use fake IDs to pawn electronics, and how to wipe devices clean. They had created a system, complete with digital folders, screenshots, and notes about each target. The group also started venturing into abandoned buildings, filming their explorations and uploading edited versions to private social media pages. During one of these outings, they discovered something they didn't expect: a warehouse filled with suspicious equipment, burner phones, and a locked safe. They didn't report it. Instead, one member took photos and posted them in the group, joking about the level boss they had found. But one of the older members had a different idea. He suggested blackmailing whoever owned the operation, believing they could use the information for money or protection. Most of the others were hesitant. They had never planned to get involved with real criminals. But curiosity and overconfidence won out. Messages were sent, demands were made. For a few days, nothing happened. Then, one of them disappeared. The game had taken a turn no one was prepared for. Deshaun was the youngest member of the Midnight Club, only 14, but he had been one of the most daring. When the group found the warehouse with suspicious equipment, it was Deshaun who had slipped inside first, taking photos and digging through drawers. He had even pocketed a flash drive, thinking it might be valuable. Days later, when the group began talking about blackmailing whoever owned the place, Deshaun claimed he had already messaged one of the contacts he found on the drive. The others panicked. They told him it was a bad idea, that they were just joking, that this had gone too far. But Deshaun insisted they had the upper hand. The next night, he left his house after midnight and never came back. At first, his parents thought he had run away. They called friends, searched nearby parks, and even checked with distant relatives. When they filed the missing persons report, they didn't mention anything about the Midnight Club. They didn't know it existed, but the remaining members did. They were terrified. Some believed Deshaun had gone to meet someone from the warehouse. Others thought he might be hiding, scared of what he had done. No one wanted to admit the worst possibility, that he had been silenced. The group fell apart almost immediately. One member stopped showing up at school. Another deleted all his social media accounts. But fear ran deeper than guilt. One boy, overwhelmed by what had happened, confessed everything to his older brother. The brother, without giving his name, called a local tip line and described the group, the crimes, and the missing boy. That tip reopened the investigation at full scale. Police re-examined the warehouse. This time, with a warrant, they uncovered clear links to an adult-run operation involving stolen identities, financial scams, and untraceable phone lines. It was far more serious than anyone had expected. Deshaun's phone was found days later, broken and discarded in a storm drain just blocks from the warehouse. There were no fingerprints, no clues. It was as if he had vanished completely. The investigation turned into a race against time. Federal agents were brought in, fearing a larger criminal network might be involved. The other teens were now witnesses and suspects, holding secrets far bigger than they could understand. What began as a game had become a gateway into something darker, and there was no turning back. News of Deshaun's disappearance and the teen-led burglary ring spread quickly across media outlets. Local headlines labeled them the Midnight Club, painting a picture of a secret society of youth criminals hiding in plain sight. The public reaction was fierce and divided. Some saw the teens as dangerous delinquents who needed to face the full force of the law. Others believed they were victims of a society that glorified crime. Online, with easy access to tutorials, challenge videos, and peer pressure wrapped in digital validation, police interviews revealed a disturbing trend. None of the teens had intended to become criminals. It had started with harmless stares, fueled by boredom and the thrill of getting away with small things. But over time, that thrill demanded more. Social media challenges turned into late-night break-ins. Friendly competition turned into risky decisions. And finally, curiosity had led them into the hands of real criminals. The blackmail attempt had crossed a dangerous line, turning them from mischievous thrill seekers into liabilities. 3 members of the group, all under 17, were charged in juvenile court with multiple counts of burglary, possession of stolen property, and conspiracy. One member, who had just turned 18, faced adult charges, including attempted extortion. Their families were shocked, devastated, and in some cases, in complete denial. The courtroom was filled with tension as each teen stood before a judge, facing the consequences of choices that had spiraled far beyond their control. Investigations into the adult criminal ring continued, leading to several arrests across state lines. The warehouse had been part of a much larger operation, one that used minors to move information and gather intel in exchange for payment or favors, but the full scope remained hidden. The leaders had vanished, likely tipped off, and none of the teens could provide names. The flash drive Deshaun had taken was encrypted and useless without the password. He was never seen again. The Midnight Club became a cautionary tale told in classrooms and community meetings. Schools began offering digital awareness sessions, while parents struggled to understand the world their kids were living in, one filled with secret chats, anonymous followers, and dangerous challenges. What had begun as a game ended in tragedy, and in the silence left behind by Deshaun's disappearance, the question still echoed: how far would someone go for a moment of power, attention, or thrill?